Hello and welcome to Verbal to Visual. Today I would like to share with you my favorite sketchnoting materials and how I'm using them. So here then is my sketchnoting toolkit. Let's start with the most inexpensive and easiest to find of the materials that I use, copy paper and legal pads. I enjoy using those at the early stages of anything that I'm working on, for the initial brainstorming and drafting of ideas that I might later polish up in some way. And whether I use blank copy paper or lined legal pads kind of just depends on the mood I'm in. For whatever reason, sometimes one is more appealing than the other. For example, in the case of the creation of these weekly videos here, I often use blank copy paper to experiment with how I might like to lay out the ideas. Here I'm working on a video from a couple of weeks ago, my 2018 to 2019 annual review, just getting a feel for what goes where. Then once I'm comfortable with the layout, I might experiment a bit with the specific visuals to include. That's what you see me working on here. Next, let's take a look at some legal pad drafting. Here you see me working out what the featured images might look like for the new podcast that I launched just last week, The Doug Neill Show. Each podcast episode has 3 segments to it, and I decided to include a mini sketch note for each segment. And here you see me working out what those mini sketch notes might look like and how to also fit in the title of the podcast and the episode number, working out those details in a low pressure way. And that's what I like about using those materials. I don't feel any pressure when I'm making marks on the page. I'm not distracted by fancy or expensive materials. My go-to pen for all of my small scale sketchnoting is the Pentel Energel 0.7mm tip, along with ink refills that I can buy in bulk so that I don't have to keep picking up that plastic casing. I keep a stash of those refills in a drawer in my office and also another stash in my backpack so that I never have to worry about running out of ink. One of my favorite journals to sketchnote in are the small, thick page moleskins. That's the notebook that I use specifically for single page, single idea public sketch notes. The sketch notes that I share on Instagram. I love the quality of those thick pages. I like the small size. I find that to be a helpful constraint when sharing any individual idea. And I like having a go-to place to share publicly, maybe a visual journal entry from my day, a book that I recently finished reading, or a single idea that I came across that felt impactful and that I wanted to share. And while I enjoy sharing some of my sketch notes with others, I do think it's important to have a space where you're taking sketch notes only for yourself. And that's what this next notebook is for, a dot grid diary flex notebook that I use for my personal sketch notes of podcasts that I'm listening to or articles that I'm reading. What I like about these notebooks is that they're essentially just the inserts without the cover, which keeps the cost pretty low. So you can pick up just one cover and keep reusing that even as you fill notebook after notebook. Shout out to my friend Raven Henderson who sent me my first diary flex notebook. I got hooked pretty quickly and I've picked up many since then. Here you see some notes from the Creative Pep Talk podcast, some notes on articles that I read in the New Yorker, another podcast, The Accidental Creative, and some quotes from a fiction book that I had just finished reading. I've enjoyed the lightly printed dot grid on these pages because it provides structure when you want it, but you can ignore it when you don't need it. And that notebook has been a nice place to capture some ideas that don't necessarily fit into any current project, but that interest me for one reason or another and that I might want to revisit in the future. My next go-to materials are foam boards, large, rigid surfaces that are 3/16 of an inch thick, 36 inches long, and 24 inches tall. Those are the canvases for sketchnote videos like these. That's what I'm writing and drawing on right now. I've been enjoying using those foam boards over paper because they feel a little bit more permanent. It feels like this sweet spot in between paper that you could crumple up and throw in the recycling bin and a fancy art canvas meant to be hung from the wall. I think that helps me bring a little bit more care and attention to the marks that I make when creating these videos, but not so much that it adds unnecessary pressure and anxiety. To make those marks on these boards within these videos, I've been using the double-sided permapaque marker that has a bullet tip on one end and a chisel tip on the other. I've been enjoying the simplicity of just those two options to add a bit of variety, a bit of hierarchy to these videos, while also just sticking to a single black color. And though I most enjoy using pen and paper tools when doing my sketchnoting, I do have one digital go-to, and that's the iPad Pro, along with the Apple Pencil and the app Procreate. I use that combo of tools for what I consider to be sketchnote illustrations. So not rough first-time sketchnotes, but slightly more polished, presentable ideas. That's what I've been using for the thumbnail images for recent videos here, as well as for the featured images for my new podcast that I mentioned drafting earlier on those legal pads. Here I've been enjoying the use of a few colors, the use of layers, and the flexibility of a digital sketching tool to move things around a bit and do the type of editing that you can't do with pen and paper. And there is one final tool combination that I wanted to share, moving back in the analog direction, using index cards and a shoebox-sized organizer. I've been using that combo to help me develop big projects. Specifically, I've been using it in the development of the resource Build an Online Course with Sketchnotes. I've been enjoying the ability to capture individual ideas on those white index cards and then use the tabbed colored cards as I experiment with the overall structure of the ideas that I'm sharing. So when it comes to something like developing a new course or even writing a book, I think a tool combination like this has a lot of potential, and I'm excited to be experimenting with it here for the first time. So there it is. These here are my favorite sketchnoting tools and a bit about how I'm using each of them. If any of them sound appealing to you, do feel free to pick them up and do some experimenting yourself, with the goal of finding those materials for you that are best suited to their purpose. It's not about buying fancy materials for the sake of having something that looks cool. Instead, it's about gathering the resources that help you to do the work that's important to you. So be sure to keep that in mind as you do your own experimenting and as you build up to your own sketchnoting toolkit. And if you'd like some more information about how to use tools like these, then check out the courses available at verbaltovisual.com. Links down below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed seeing the tools that I use on a daily basis, and good luck as you seek out those that will work well for you. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Till then.